Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Welcome to the Print Soft Cover. Today we have with us Mr. K Annamalai, who has served in the Indian Police Service for over 9 years. He's known as the Singham of Karnataka and currently is Tamil Nadu State BJP Vice President. He has written an excellent book called The Stepping Beyond Khakhi, in which he has narrated how there's a reform that's needed in Indian politics, in the police services, and it's a detailed account of his police memoirs, what he went through when he was serving as a police officer, as a superintendent of police in various important districts. Welcome to the Print Soft Cover, sir.
Hello, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you for talking to me.
So, sir, today we'll be just unveiling your book, which is wrapped in this beautiful pink, vibrant cover. It's called Stepping Beyond Khakhi. Stepping Beyond Khakhi, Revelations of A Real-Life Singham. This is published by Bloomsbury, India. And today we'll be talking about this big book, his experience as a police officer, and why he really chose to quit his job that he loved so much and enter politics. So, sir, just to begin this discussion, if you could just give us a brief about how those 9 years that you spent in the Indian police services were, and why did you choose to really quit the job that you, in fact, have in detail narrated in your book you loved?
It's a very fabulous journey, ma'am. Being a part of the Indian civil service itself is an adventure. In a country like India with imperfect systems, the country sorely depends on good civil servants to run the country on a daily basis. So it was a great adventure. And I was fortunate to be in the state of Karnataka and happened to serve in different positions in different districts as SP, ASP, and DCP, different areas. So as I mentioned in the starting point of my book, it starts with this: why quit when the going is good? Right. And everything was going well, I quitted. So why is that after 9 years? Normally, people quit police for a couple of reasons. One, the main reason is they feel fed up with the service. They believe the interference is too high. They want to do something else in life. This is the common answer that most people who quit at my age gives, 35, 40, at that age. So for me was, I felt very satisfied, though it was 9.5 years, I felt very satisfied. And there was always an inner urge. If you go through the subsequent chapters of the book, I talk about that. Right. There was an inner urge to get back to the roots. So I was no more the ASP cop. I was no more the SP cop. With time and with service, I was going up the ranks. My pedigree was going up, but somehow I felt I was getting disconnected with the root. So I entered civil service to be a part of the grassroots and bring that change there. And as I mentioned in the reforms part also, the political policy reforms part also, I felt the country also needs a kind of good leaders at the political level, where a lot of laws and all those things can be changed at that level. So being a cop becomes easier at that once the laws that control a police force, once the state and the central government becomes more efficient, the job of a policeman also becomes that much easier. For me, quitting the police force was all about looking at a slightly larger dimension of life, where I felt I can always go back to the grassroots and serve in a much more, I would say, in a holistic way. Though the service in policing was great, I felt 9 years had that fulfillment. I felt it's time to move on.
So, in fact, as I said in great detail, you talk about how police reforms are utmostly needed, how reforms are needed in politics, and you also talk about how political interference is, in fact, an integral part of policing, something that most police officers do not talk about honestly, and how leadership is very important. A caring and compassionate leader is what the police force requires. So, when you say these things, sir, in fact, I have made some notes about you saying that policing is in the world is actually misunderstood. Why do you say that, and what do you mean by it?
As I mentioned, ma'am, it's an imperfect system, and more so a country that is only growing up now. In the sense, I always say India is a country of 18th century laws and 21st century aspirations. The aspirations are 21st century, but the laws are not up to date to what people really want. So being a cop in this age and time, especially in a country like India, is very tough because police is a state subject. So you are given to a state and state controls you. And the democracy is maturing. The democracy in India is not yet fully matured. right from a panchayat to the MP level, you get different kinds of leaders, and the policeman has to work with all of them, right from a sub-inspector to an IPS officer.
Right.
So it's a big challenge. On top of it, you don't have good resources to do your policing also. As I mentioned in one chapter of the book, where the government would rather buy a bus which will generate revenue rather than giving money to a police force,
Right.
which will only do a service. Police is not a revenue generating force. So coupled with the lack of resource, coupled with that imperfect system, coupled with the maturing democracy, being a policeman is all the more tough in a country with the expectations are so high. The people want really better services, quicker services, faster services. And the problem lies there. People want something and the police force is not equipped to deliver. The gap in the middle talks about the inefficiency of the force.
Right.
Having said that, this book is all about the heroes of police force. So I deliberately chose to keep me in the background. So you might not see me anywhere in the book speaking out. I have always put this sub-inspectors, the inspectors, the constables to the forefront. So these guys deliver this despite the lack of all those things. So the emphasis on the book is all about that, where people go beyond their call of duty. In police force, it is always beyond the call of duty. So every time you got to go beyond that, beyond the job profile, only then you can deliver.
Right.
So India is a country still that is running and police force is still delivering, and people still have some hope on the police force only because we have a lot of quiet heroes throughout the force who keep delivering to the best of their ability. So if you're able to give them better laws, if they're able to give them better reforms, better resources, and Indian police force can one of the best police force in the world. So no police force can match India. The reason is ours is the one police force where you need a lot of emotional quotient to deal with Indian people, unlike the US and the European forces, where the mere intellectual ability you can handle those things. But India is a country with a lot of caste, a lot of religious, a lot of other divisions. So a successful cop has to have a lot of emotional quotient. He has to have very high
being the
EQ.
first respondent, of course, the police has to be extra cautious about these things.
You're right, ma'am. You're right. So you're always the first responder for everything, be it a municipal issue, be it a revenue issue, and be it a police issue. Every time your heads roll. And I'm just wondering if we consciously allocate resources to our guys, if we consciously groom better leaders in the police force, and the Indian police force would be a far, far superior force without any doubt.
Right. So we'll talk about these, how leadership is very important and how, in fact, in great detail, you talk about the role of constables, sub-inspectors, which you call as the backbone of policing in our country. Just let me take you back to the initial chapters of your book when you are talking about you being an IIM graduate and how you then decide to go on to civil services. You walk into an institute and meet a doctor from Chennai. If you could just recall those training days of yours, how difficult it was, because going through those chapters, even though I am not a police officer, I could feel, what a trainee police officer would have been going through at that moment.
It's very tough, ma'am. So I never wanted to be a cop. Frankly speaking, I wanted to be a businessman. That is why I went to IIM for my MBA. But somehow life in UP changed me. UP is a great state, phenomenal state, amazing people. But having said that, the experience I had there, traveling across UP, especially in the Purvanchal side, and the Mumbai attack, November 26 in 2008, both happened in my first year. Somehow I felt civil service is my calling. So it was a very audacious attempt. You take a train, because I've read where all the top civil servants, they come from Delhi. So I've heard about one name where a lot of guys come. I went there and I was just trying to get into that office to inquire how to start the exam, how to do the whole thing. There was one Dr. Mahesh, and we connected after I wrote the book. I wanted to give him a copy. We connected now. Such a great man. So he was standing there. I asked him, I'm so and so. I come from Lucknow, and I wanted to meet the administration guy to take some help. He said, no, it doesn't work like that. You come, we will go for a walk. So he took me for a walk outside the institute. I still recall this moment. He took me to his place. He ran me through the whole thing about how the civil service functions, the 3 exams you got to give, the prelims, mains, and the interview, how it's a 1-year process and it involves a lot of hard work. I'll always be grateful for this guy, because in this age and time when the human beings, they've become very selfish also. We rarely see selfless guys who go out and help others. So starting from that day, and he was the main impetus for me to crack that exam. And cracking this exam along with an IIM is very tough. As they say, getting into IIM is easier, but getting out is tougher, because it's very tough. But somehow the deans were very kind, the professors were very kind. When the exams were clashing, I was able to manage that also. So only when I wrote this book, I was able to recall all those moments. In the heat of the moment, I never ever fully understood the kind of effort that I put in. While writing that book, I've really understood, oh my God, and how nice people were to me, how lucky I was able to write both exams together. And it's like one hurdle after the other hurdle. After you cross it, when you get into NPA Hyderabad, I've wrote in very detail about the
Right.
training part.
Right.
It's very tough. Right from the horses, nobody listens to you there.
Right.
And it's a 2-year full training. So the year one is all about uh, leadership ability, fitness, and trying to belong there.
In fact, you have
And
mentioned one bungee jumping incident as a life-altering incident for you.
correct, man. Correct. And this training, the IPS training itself is focused on a lot of out of comfort zone moments. So a lot of training is designed in such a way you get to experience training in such a way that you get pulled out of your comfort zone. So one such zone is you go to a bungee in the highest part of India, in Uttaranchal. So you go there with all your mojo, and moment you go there, you see the height where human beings are like tiny ants. You don't want to jump. So that jump was an important jump in my life because it taught me about risk and how I can perceive risk in life. So the training has shaped a lot of us to be better human beings, more than better police officers.
Right.
I always believe better human beings, they become better police officers. The vice versa is not true. Better police officers are not good human beings always, not always. So training is phenomenal, and thanks to all our ustads. Normally we call our training people as ustad, we call them, and they put their heart and soul to train us. And I am a proper thoroughbred South Indian with very little Hindi, and Lucknow to Delhi to Hyderabad is a very fascinating journey. I saw the best of India as well at that point of time.
So how different was UP from Tamil Nadu, sir? And why do you stress upon your journey in UP as one of the most important assignments that you've ever had?
Tamil Nadu is a very ordered state, maybe on the conservative side as well. But UP is a very free flowing in the sense I found a huge population, a lot of population, and governance not at its greatest. I'm talking of 2008 to 10.
Right.
Governance is improving, and the have-nots is more than haves. And a simple issue of people not doing a breastfeeding, and that children are dying before 30 days. So UP told me what India is all about. So I started liking UP after that, because very great human beings, very original human beings, very, very, very dignified human beings. At the same time, somehow the government was not supporting them. Somehow life was not very kind to them. So going around that, it gave a meaning to my life. A person like me at the age of 22, trying to figure out what I want to do in life, UP gave me that idea that probably I should dedicate my life to the service of others, betterment of others. So UP is a very important turning point in my life, madam.
Right. So talking about the idea of a policeman, you are called the Singham of Karnataka. We have seen in Bollywood movies how a cop goes around bashing bad people. And you in your book, in fact, have written that policing is not just about machoism and, bashing up bad guys. So because in the book, you detail about how weekly ops are so important, how empowering subordinates is so important. So when you say policing, what all does it entail?
I've mentioned, ma'am, in a particular para, I've written that a policeman's typical day, probably in the morning, you are a marriage counselor. Then probably late in the afternoon, you are a drugs counselor for a drug addict. Then in the evening, you go and catch pickpockets on the road, and you do some traffic in between, and bandobast, VIP security, you do all those things in between. Right. So if you look at all those things, ma'am, you need to have a lot of empathy. So a policeman has to have a lot of empathy, more than bashing up and having that macro image. And second, you've got to be a keen listener, because everybody who comes to you comes with a lot of problems which others can't solve. So these two are important for me. And when we are able to structure a training, structure a policeman on this empathy and keen listening, probably he becomes a better human being, because he's aware of other person's problem. He feels the other person's pain. Right. And many a time, as I mentioned, ma'am, since it's an imperfect system, and you can't just move the file to the other department. So police, many times when people come to you, they come to you as a last resort. Absolutely. So you got to go that extra call. You got to take that extra call to get the problem solved at your level. So many a time I see when the street lights don't function in the evening, that is the time the chain snatching goes up. So if I just write a letter to somebody in the government department to fix the street light, it doesn't happen that way.
Right.
So what we do is our beat constables go there, they catch hold of the contractor, they climb up that thing, they fix that bulb, and the light comes. So that is what I mentioned, ma'am. To do that, they got to be better human beings. So you got to feel that somebody's loss of property is your loss of property.
Right.
And when the traffic arrangements is not proper, when somebody dies, and maybe it could be somebody's child, it could be somebody's husband, somebody's wife, but you got to feel it is as if they're our family member. So I've seen good leaders, they have empathy at the core of their policing, ma'am. So
Right.
I was very fortunate to work with some great leaders. And some of the training is not up to the mark in producing empathetic individuals. So this has to happen at the constabulary, at the sub-inspector. You see all those bad things in the TV and whatever print also keeps writing about the high-handedness of the police people. It all happens because somehow we are not able to create empathetic individuals, so who become better human beings. On top of that, they are better police officers. So
So
this is how I would say.
where do you think we lack as a system, sir? Is it because, in fact, in your book also you have mentioned about increased working hours and no relief, no weekly offs. Then they can't go and meet their families. There is no time to have lunch. They can't take care of their health. So where are we lacking here when you talk about this? That police high-handedness.
I think it's government's intent, ma'am. The government has to have a very clear intent that policing cannot be neglected in a society. So in a democracy, it's understandable that the politicians want to keep police at arm's length. You want to control the police machinery, but it doesn't work that way.
Right.
So policemen have to be having that freedom, and they have to have the ability to do policing free of political interference. So once we have that intent, then the money flows. I mentioned there in somewhere in the book also the kind of budget that is given to a police department. It's very, very low, ma'am. Very, very low.
Right.
The whole of Indian policing budget is less than the New York Police Department's budget. So it is that low.
Right.
So people have to have better systems, better firearms, better cars, better vehicles, better place to stay. Even the housing unit has to improve, better police stations. Once we take care of all the peripheral stuff, ma'am, then what happens is this guy mentally is free. He's no more bothered about having the 20,000 salary and taking care of 2 kids at home. So this can happen only when the government is clear in its intent that policing has to be free from all political interference. Number 2, the citizens also has to understand that to have a better police force, it's important that they demand. They keep demanding other things. They keep demanding water. They keep demanding electricity. Likewise, a law and order has become a basic for anybody's functioning, because we all go walk in the evening. I want everybody to secure when they walk. Right. And you and me, we go at high-speed cars on the highway. So we want police to police that road. So citizens also has to become more vociferous, telling the politicians that more amount of budget or more resources has to be given to the police department. So when the pressure is on the public, from the citizens on the political side, then reforms will start flowing.
Okay. So, in fact, you have mentioned in your book some action points while you were in service as a police officer, some points that you laid out for your people, for the people who are working under you. If you can just give us a peek into what those action points were, because I have read the book, but for our viewers.
This is a very early part of my career, ma'am, when I was an assistant superintendent of police in a place called Karkala in Udupi district. Somehow I've stayed out of MBA, and we all have all big things in our head to do it. So it is that time. So idealism was more than practicality. Somehow I felt the human resources that we have is not up to the mark. The language that we use, and the responsibility that we take, the leadership that we show. So I had a very single charter where we used to paste in the police station. This is after a combined group think with all the constables and everybody. We felt as a senior police officer, I will start taking pressure. So pressure will not go downwards because the leader has to take pressure. Right. I felt the moment the pressure gets passed downwards, so everybody starts behaving like they're out of control. So we wanted to fix that so that everybody can coolly, happily work. So even something goes wrong, as long as the intent was there, I said I'll protect them. Right. Then we started with the kind of language. I always found within the police department, the subordinates were not treated very fairly and equitably. A constable was not given the respect that it deserved. So we give so much respect to a politician, but we don't give respect to our own brothers who are inside the police force. So that I felt has to change. And we said there is no compromise on weekly ops. Everybody has to take 1 day break in a week. So that is, if at all they are not interested, it is for their family. They have to go to a temple or a mosque or church or cinema theater, wherever they want. but it is for them. So only if their
Right.
mind is at ease, they can come out and do some work.
Right.
So I started going after people who are not taking a weekly off, because I've written in the book also, I saw cases where people weren't taking weekly off for 15 years at a stretch.
Right.
Imagine people working non-stop, and you have to say with a lot of pride.
Right.
I never took a leave in 15 years, which I felt in a job which requires empathy. Probably we are doing it. So this is the charter I mentioned. So
Right.
I call that as a time for selling my vision, chapter title
Yeah.
that. So I found once people are able to buy that vision, and for me also, I felt I will not be like a normal IPS officer. So I'll be very different, and I will not have orderlies, and
Right.
I'll be the normal self, and I will not take any help from anybody unless it's legally allowed to me.
Right.
So I started behaving like a normal human being, expecting the guys around me will start behaving like a normal human being. Once we start doing it, and then I felt the core of empathy will somehow come into the police force, and will start treating people with the respect they deserve. So this is what it
Right.
is.
That was quite a revolutionary idea, in fact, sir, because we don't see it at many places wherein the officer is actually thinking so much about his subordinates. But in fact, eventually you say that this vision that you had was, you could see it falling apart because there were so many challenges. So if you could just tell us what these challenges exactly were.
It's typical of management, ma'am. So normally when we bring any new ideation into an existing structure, and there are a lot of forces which will oppose it. So here, uh, I felt the challenges to the vision were many, and one, it started with the weekly off itself. People felt if they don't take a weekly off, a day off in the week, government was paying them 350 rupees
Right.
per day,
Right.
and for them monetary incentive was more important than their break, because they
Right.
felt a person who's earning 20,000 salary, 1,400 rupees per month was making a lot of difference. So because they're poorly paid, as they mentioned also, ma'am, at a
Right. Right.
constable level. Second, at the leadership level also, somehow it's a muscle memory for them. 10, 15 years, sub-inspector was bossing over an assistant sub-inspector, he was bossing over an head constable. And suddenly, one fine day, when I said that everybody is equal, and maybe rank-wise somebody is superior,
Right.
but you can't use language that is not right. So for them, it was a little bit tough to get adjusted to the new environment. And thirdly, when I became more open, so it was more like a radical transparency. The whole
Right.
office was supposed to be open, and there's no place for corruption. And people know, if you don't perform, I'm going to complain to the ASP. So that new radical transparency was a little bit tough for them. So which I was expecting, ma'am. There was that resistance, which I felt we had to again go deep down again,
Right.
do a lot of talking, and more than talking, I had to walk my talk for 1-2 months. Then people started believing this is a guy who will never speak and run away. Probably has got some intention behind his speech.
Right.
So yes, ma'am, I mentioned that in detail as well.
Yeah, yeah. So talking about power perception, in fact, as I mentioned earlier, the book is very honest when it comes to political interference in policing. But your first brush with politicians was, you have mentioned an episode of a hartal. So you have said that how dealing with politicians is something that is a part and parcel of a policeman's life, but one needs to know how to go about it. So, if you could just give us a brief about that hartal, what was that first brush with the politicians, and what did you, as a young police officer, understand of it?
That's a very important moment in my policing journey, ma'am, where I was given the job of arresting a culprit. It happened in the nearby subdivision, so I'm not at all in charge of that place, but somehow
Right.
the district chief felt I should go there. So when I went there, he arrested the right person, got him to the police station, and sent him behind bar. But somehow what happened is, typical of India, where people took recourse to religion. People said, I'm supposed to go to this temple, and this guy offended me by calling me names, and he has insulted the robe I'm wearing, the clothes I'm wearing. So what happened is, the next day they called for a big bandh and against me, and 10,000 plus people gathered. And I'm 1 year into my service. Some of the seniors felt I'm not practical enough to handle that. So they kept me locked inside the police station, inside the office, asking me not to come. So that whole atmosphere of, that's
Right.
the first time I felt how people, if they operate very smartly, they can take law into their own hands, and how they understand how perceptions shape you and me, they can game the whole system.
Right.
So that was a great brush for me. And the whole thing, what happened that 2 days was unfortunate, where police force was forced to buckle under pressure, and we left the culprit out. It's a very sad day. where they knew once 10,000 people come and the police force is 300, 400, and you don't have a chance against that mighty crowd. So, and that was a very important impetus for me. So that is why I mentioned about perception is very important in our life. So every time I used to make a decision post that, more than making the decision, I always used to wonder, how will the decision come across? Can I put it in a better way? Can I convey the intent of the decision in a positive way? So I used to take a lot of care and effort with my officers that it's all about conveying the intent behind the decision. If you convey a normal decision, a guy might see the same decision with a different perception. So though it was a very negative thing for me, I was very honest with what I've written. And I felt that was a very important lesson for me, and which I subsequently inculcated in a lot of my other dealings throughout my life. Even now I keep doing that. Sometimes I fail and sometimes I succeed. But I felt if I'm able to take care of the perception, many times we're able to convey what we actually wanted to convey. So that is a chapter.
In a riot-like situation, or in an environment that's communally charged up, what goes on into the mind of a police man who is on the ground trying to control the situation? Because what we see often, like I would give you a recent example of the Northeast Delhi riots, in which the police inaction, in fact, is questioned by many, that there were so many people running havoc and the police were just standing there as mute spectators. Of course, the rioters had outnumbered the police force. Probably that was the reason. But what goes into the mind of a policeman? Are they really trained for these kind of situations? Because living in India with so much diversity, these situations rise up quite often.
You're right, ma'am. That's an excellent question. So people are trained, but you always know, ma'am, it's a training cannot simulate everything. It's a small training where there will be some 50 guys, and the police guys in the training would be taught how to deal with those 50 guys. But normally, when we go into a very riot situation, when the police force is not disciplined, we are asking for trouble. So what happened in Delhi? I've seen this over 3-4 months before the Northeast riot. So now I'm a citizen like you, ma'am. What I read in the paper is, so initially I think lawyers assaulted the police force, and that issue was bubbling. And the police went for a riot outside the commissioner's office that was bubbling, and the riot happened. So somehow when the police force loses discipline, then we are in trouble, ma'am. So a lot of effort has to be there to keep the force disciplined. And now with the age of social media, ma'am, nobody just listens to the world called discipline and keep quiet. Nobody listens. Nobody is like that. So every police guy believes he's an important guy. Every constable believes he's important because he's having a Twitter and a Facebook at hand. So you got to give good leadership to him. Only if you give good leadership to him, he will be fully disciplined, ma'am. If you don't give good leadership, if the posting is on political whims and fancy, and the constable at the ground believes the SP is not taking care of him well, the commissioner is not taking care of him well, then probably will not give his heart and soul in a riot thing. And thirdly, ma'am, the riots are no more riots now. Riots are a deadly combination of false news, deadly combination of social media pandering, deadly combination of all things that is wrong. So even the rioters, half the time, they go out of control because the riot actually starts with something in mind. So within 6-7 hours, it becomes something totally. All the false news, somebody gets killed, somebody gets fired. So this is the time when the police leaders have to act as peacemakers also, rather than every time taking lathi to find the answer. The police have to act as peacemakers, control the emotion of the crowd, at the same time keep the police force in hand, at the same time find a very judicious mix between aggression and defense. So it's a very fine art, ma'am. That is why we still remember KPS Gills and very Mr. K Vijay Kumar and Mr. Prakash Singh. Very few police officers we have in mind, because they are able to master the fine balance between an aggression and defense. So that happens when the leaders also have to shape up well, ma'am. Now a policing leader has to understand that he is responsible to two people. He is responsible to his own force, as well as is responsible to the citizens who are under his control. So he should have that mindset. So nobody is the enemy. I just saw the New York Times article also yesterday, where they've written about the Delhi police force. I hope it is false. I don't believe any police force is like that. And no police force in India targets any community by their name, any community by that. I just hope and pray it did not happen that way. Probably there's a misinterpretation somewhere. So I only blame the leaders for not acting enough, for not keeping things in check, for not monitoring the prior intelligence also. Why are you allowing riots to blow up to that level? So where is our intelligence mechanism? And why are we not talking to the community leaders even before the crowd has assembled? Why are we not diffusing diffusing tension at that level in the peace committee meetings, ma'am?
Right.
It's a great question, but having said that, ma'am, it requires a longish answer, ma'am. Thank you.
Right. This actually takes me back to that time when so many cops had gathered outside Delhi police headquarters protesting against their own leader, something that was unprecedented, never heard of before, because police force is something, I mean, a force that goes by discipline, and hierarchy is everything, and your leader is unquestionable. And, here we had so many of policemen, head constables, till inspector level, protesting against their own leader, asking for a change in leadership. So this is why I think you're talking about why leadership is so important, because that is what they kept talking about, that if we take an action against someone, then we are questioned. If we don't take action against someone, then we are questioned. So our leaders don't stand beside us, and that is what we want. So I think you've answered that. So you have also spoken about mantras of winning the battle against perception. So that was a very interesting point in the book. You have listed out the mantras. If you could just share a few points with us on
that. Ma'am, in the perception battle, what I've mentioned is, as I'm talking to you, I'm just opening the book. So, yeah. Winning the perception, yes, ma'am. So it's more important is how do we communicate what we have to communicate. If we don't do that well, so we are in trouble. So if I go to the mantras directly, ma'am, I mentioned about we have to understand as human being, we all have biases inside. So the way we are conditioned. So as a leaders, when we start taking decisions with those bias that is already built in, then we are in trouble. So 26, 27-year-old guy becomes an IPS. So 26 years, he has seen the society. People have told him what a male is, what a female is, and who is powerful and who is not so powerful. So this bias, unless we are not aware of it, then we are in trouble, ma'am. So that is the first point I mentioned. Yeah. So aware of your bias, and so that when you make decisions, you can know that you can transcend this bias before making the better decision, and put yourself in others' shoes before you make a decision. Many a time what happens is, ma'am, we sit in AC rooms, and the police force, the bigger you grow up in service, SPs and DIGs and IGs, you lose touch with ground level.
Right.
So you sit in big offices, and information that comes to you is always filtered, and people will always tell you things that you want to hear, that is pleasing to you. Right. So many a time we lose that beginner's touch. I would say beginner spirit or beginner's touch, put ourselves in other shoes, and rethink how our actions will be perceived. This is the intention behind your decision. When people receive it, will they receive it with the same intention? And when I was bringing in weekly off, the intention was to take care of my guys. Right. But many people, when they received it, they felt, oh, this guy is not allowing me to earn my 1,400 rupees. Right. And I don't have work at home. What is he doing? Because the intention receiving is a problem, ma'am.
Right.
And I also mentioned about give benefit of doubt to the opposite person. I mean, this age and time, with so much thing around, we always believe what we do is right. And we have all the information to believe what we do is right. At the same time, we have to understand maybe the other person is also right. Can I give him some time to listen to him? So this normally happens in suspension of police constables. I've written in a chapter also, where many a time I've seen a drunkard, a police guy who's drunk on duty, we just suspend him. Yes, it's wrong. But suspension is only the triggering factor. So many a time when you go sit with them and talk, why are you drinking? And the cost factors are something else. And I mentioned about a person's love failure and how it affected them. Right. So that also is important, because we can go for long-term solutions. When in anger, I mentioned think about the points again. So 1 to 5. Yes, ma'am. That's what I mentioned.
So, in fact, as I said, that the book is a very, very honest admission of so many things. One thing that you write about, and in fact, I was quite surprised about reading it, when you mentioned that how bribery is systematic in policing. Because wherever you go, if you have like an image of a policeman, so ye hota hai ki wo paisa khata hoga. That's like a general image of a policeman. And you, in fact, in your book have mentioned in great detail how one old man came to you, handed over a rupee 500 note just because you did your job. But he thought that he has to pay you for what you did. If you could just recall that incident once for our viewers, because I think that was a very, very strong incident, and it shakes you up when you read it, that even an old man thinks that he has to pay an officer 500 rupees for doing his job.
2013, I think in the month of September, to be precise, ma'am, when I was an ASP 2 months into my job, this old gentleman had some land issue with a neighbor. So which I went and solved because his neighbor is a continuous petition guy. He keeps petitioning about others. And when he came to my office again, probably I thought he's here to tell me some other issue. But when he put that 500 rupee note on my table, when I asked him, why are you paying me this? He told me, this is for the service I've given. And the analogy the village people or the old gentleman had was, bus is given by the government, but you travel in a bus, you got to pay. So a bus is not free. Likewise, police have given everything, we got to pay, because I felt it's very unfortunate. Such a noble profession like policing, where we are the last resort for people's property and life, is perceived that way. At the same time, I was very happy in a sense. At the very beginning of my policing career, I was able to understand how people perceive bribe, people perceive corruption. So after that, many a time, I used to encourage our police guys to not only to solve issues that are beyond their call of duty, but also to embrace the have-nots, so that they don't have a distance between the government and them. So moment you keep closing that distance, a lot of imagination doesn't go into their head. For them, an MLA is a distant guy, MP is a distant guy. Likewise, an IPS officer is also a distant guy. So moment they see you, they believe you are like a god to them. So this normally happens in the rural parts of India, more so in other parts of India also. But that was a great lesson for me. And probably he was seeing me, the whole thing. He was seeing me going and fighting with the neighbor and bringing that surveyor and measuring that land. And 2 days I was continuously going there. Probably he felt this guy is going beyond his call of duty. But having said that, that was a brilliant lesson for me, that if we allow the gap between the governments and a set of people to be larger, then this kind of problem starts cropping up in between.
Right. So you also honestly mentioned how the top tier is compromised. So I would really not blame that old man who put that 500 rupee on your table. What is the solution for this, sir? Because this is, it's a very general question, but what do you think, since you've also served in the police department for 9 years and now you also have started a career in politics? So what do you think, where does the solution really lie?
It starts with finding better guys to who can sit in positions of influence. So for policing, for every corrupt guy you show me, I can show you 10 honest guys, man. 10 people, constables. You go to their home, you just can't believe people can live in that home, but they're ramrod honest. 22,000, 23,000 rupees, 2 children, they grow up and they bring them up very well. So I think it's all about intention. So this starts right from recruitment. And we got to find a way to bring human psychology. We got to bring in a way to filter out the bad apples at the recruitment stage only. So this UPSC is trying with an ethics paper now. This is after many years, UPSC has brought ethics paper now.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how successful they are. I happen to understand the ethics topper, who later became an IAS officer in Rajasthan, was himself caught by the Anti-Corruption Bureau in Rajasthan. I'm not sure whether a mere examination can differentiate right and wrong. And second, the system has to encourage honest people to grow. This is very bad, man. So what happens is, many a time when a compromised officer stands before a politician, stands outside his house, he is willing to sell himself. So normally he gets a posting of his choice. He's able to help him later.
Right.
But politics in India is very brutal, and it's very backward looking also, where we want people of our choice in positions of influence so that we can curry favor with them.
Right.
So the system has to build in. For example, 2-year tenure in the Supreme Court judgment in Prakash Singh case in 2006. They mentioned you got to have a 2-year tenure. Nobody should remove you for 2 years. I think more than 2-year tenure, a time should come where citizens should also grade a police officer's performance. There has to be a 360-degree performance, like what the current government has got for senior IAS officers in Delhi. A policeman has to be evaluated not only by his seniors, by his juniors, by his subordinates, as well as by the people, so that together we can make a pen picture of how good this guy is.
Right.
So for every time, if we don't promote a good guy in the system, and not only is a good guy lagging back, it is also a lesson for bad guys that they can keep growing in the system by gaming the system. So there is no easy answer for that. It starts with systemic reforms. It starts with recruitment processes. It starts with better politics. I've linked this to the politics chapter also.
Right.
When we don't have good leaders in a political system, the other civil servants or other people who are dependent on the political system, they get corrupted very fast. So it's a long shot, ma'am. So slowly, steadily, we got to bring in reforms everywhere.
Right. So you also say that the bureaucrats, IPS, have a very complex and uneasy kind of a relationship with politicians. So how do you suggest that a police officer or a bureaucrat coexists with the politician? And this I'm asking for UPSC aspirants or probably young officers who may be watching us.
For friends who are watching me, they have to understand in a democracy, it's winners all mindset. A politician gets tested every 5 years. A bureaucrat never gets tested. You pass the exam at 24, 25. Until retirement, nobody tests us. So it's a time-bound promotion. A politician by that nature is vulnerable, is scary, and is very backward-looking. He will do anything to win an election. So this mindset we have to understand. Now, to deal with that, at the same time, politicians, if you go straight away fighting with them, so straight away, day one, I fight with them, you fight with me, we will see who's better. It doesn't work that way. So give some time for both of you to ease out. I always had this theory in mind. I always had long postings wherever I was posted. 2 years, 2.5 years was a normal tenure for me in the 4 postings I had. So for me, first month is all about studying the politician. Probably anything illegally tells me, I would say, sir, I want you to meet for a cup of coffee, and can I meet you? And sit with him in a government guest house, drink a cup of coffee, then very politely, very dutifully, I would tell him, this is neither right for him nor for me. And over a point of time, invariably, all the politicians used to understand, okay, this guy will never favor me, nor will he favor others. This is very important. The transparency, combined with humility, combined with patience. So this is lacking with many new civil servants now, because we are in a hurry and we want to change the whole world in one day. It doesn't happen that way. And many a time I've seen when I'm in very critical trouble, it's the politicians who save me than the police officers, because the politicians will normally say, oh, this guy is a good guy, he's very hot-headed, but he doesn't favor anybody. He's like a guy who's like equal to everybody. So that is one lesson which I felt after 9 years. With all humility, I can tell this to the budding officers, because you will have great careers ahead of you, provided you understand how to deal with politics, how to deal with politicians. And second, also we have to understand there are some things which you can't compromise. It is not that every time you can have a cup of tea and cup of coffee with them. So be very bold and say it at the outset only that you can't do it, sir, this for so and so reason. And if you're very open, so that builds a culture of openness and transparency. Just like politicians, I've seen many officers also, they keep pushing, I'll do it tomorrow, sir, next week we will talk. And finally, when you say no, the politician becomes all the more angry. And last but not the least, the people power is much more superior to you. So cultivate good image among the public. So when you are under severe political pressure, the public will save you. So when I was transferred in Udupi, a lot of people protested because they felt I am their guy. This is after 2.5 years. Then I have to tell the people that no, I've done my tenure. I want to go to some other district. Kindly allow me. So you got to build that rapport with public, important community leaders, and together holistically, I think we can take care of the politicians, because you got to believe at your heart, politicians are not bad people. This is very important. Politicians are forced to act bad because circumstances are like that. So normally seeing the movie and other things, we somehow have that mental image in our mind, politics is bad. Politics is bad because over a point of time, the system has become corrupted. So have that mind that by virtue of opening up and talking to a politician, probably you can see the goodness in them. At the same time, you without compromising can still get the job done.
Right. Sir, taking you back to your policing career a little, you were talking about investigating crime cases and how in a murder case, when you were interrogating an accused, it made you wonder what society has come to. So as a police officer, when you see these brutal cases, which is day in, day out, how does a policeman actually keeps aside all those emotions and deals with investigation in a very scientific and clinical manner?
There are two sides to the coin, ma'am. So what happens, I've seen many a time, my police friends have become very numb to human emotions. They're so numb. They're like, hota hai, this will happen. People die in road traffic accident. What can we do? So this is also very dangerous, ma'am. So what happens, you lose that emotion. Emotion is very important, I believe, in a job that you deal with people. So at the same time, you got to have a very clear sense of direction. In the middle of crisis, you got to solve it. So you should not allow that emotion also to not do your job.
Right.
So this is a very fine art, ma'am. So this happens with continuous training and continuous awareness, continuous mental awareness, and at every time understanding what is dharma. I mentioned about dharma also in the chapter.
Yeah.
And being aware of who you are and what is the job at hand at that point of time. You can cry later, but the important thing is to save the victim, transport the victim, or even the victim is dead. Make sure that you collect the important scientific clues from the victim's body. So these are all non-compromisable things that have to be done. So emotions can come later. At the same time, when you have to show emotion, you've got to show emotion also. So I think this comes with a lot of awareness, man, a lot of openness, and being very dharmic also. Dharmic in India right now becomes a religious word. I think it's not about bringing religion inside. Dharmic is all about being acutely aware of who you are, the surrounding, what is happening, and the father losing his child, and what is the vulnerable position the father is. If you're if you're aware of it, we will not allow a father to be in the police station to write an FIR for 4 hours. When the son's body is waiting in the ambulance, just after he met with a road traffic accident, or a husband giving a complaint when the wife is killed in the road. So this is a problem, ma'am. So this fine thing, if you're able to get in, then I think the people will start appreciating the police force much more.
Right. So talking about these gruesome crimes, including crime against women, whether it is rape or molestation or other crimes that are on the rise, do you think strict policing is enough to stop these crimes from happening? Because arresting is fine. When police solves a case, the arrests are made, even if it leads to conviction, but the crime still keeps happening. So is better policing a solution, or it lies somewhere in our society and needs to be dealt with differently?
Ma'am, since you have read the book, ma'am, I also mentioned about the repeat criminals. So most of the gruesome crimes of the rape and molestation are repeat criminals. I've given the data also there. So that happens because policing is one part of the criminal justice system. The courts, the prisons, and everything is important. Somehow I believe all three are not up to the mark. The court's very delayed judgment. And by the time the guy comes out on bail and he goes to jail, and jail is more like a laboratory for criminals. It is not a reformation center. It is a laboratory for more crimes, and police force with our lethargic and faulty investigation, and many a time the case is not very watertight. So all this three has to massively improve on. And you quickly catch a criminal, and the court is able to sentence him quickly and is able to reform inside the jail. And along with it, the society's mindset. Now, after the social media, what has happened with Twitter and Facebooks and everything, the role of government is also massively changing with respect to who controls what and who consumes what information, what is censorship versus freedom of speech. And all those things are also is playing a very important role now. And thirdly, the way we live in a society, ma'am, as a society, I think somehow over a point of time, we brought a lot of things that are not in a good spirit inside. So the way we look at women, the way we look at children, the way we look at the weaker sex, it's not the way we are supposed to look at them. So thanks to movies and the Netflix and the Amazons and everything, somehow it gives a very distorted picture of women in our society. So all those things have to change. So combinedly, society, governments, and the criminal justice system, together we got to approach, ma'am. Because if you hit one area, probably it is not enough. You got to hit. That is why I'm waiting for any good committees or anybody to have a very holistic approach to the whole problem of crimes. Then probably the reformation will be much faster.
And so while talking about police reforms, where do you think they are stuck? Because despite so many committee reports, even Supreme Court saying that those must be implemented, it's still stuck. It's not happening. What is the reason for that? Where is it stuck? Is it that the governments are not willing? Is it that the police department is not willing? What is it? Where is it stuck?
I think both has to be blamed, both the government and the police force, especially the top leadership. They come in a certain way. Moment you bring reforms, probably they'll be more affected than anybody. And you're going to give an oversight committee, and you're going to bring a lot of other things inside. And the government's naturally in a democracy, they want officers who listen to them, who are at their beck and call. So together, and it's very unfortunate in 2006 Supreme Court putting its foot down and accelerating the process, still not maybe Kerala, maybe Tamil Nadu, they've done Karnataka, they've done parts of what Supreme Court has mandated. Nobody has done it fully.
Right.
And that's very unfortunate, ma'am. And every time some big thing happens in India, immediately we react. Like what happened in Nirbhaya, something big happened.
Right.
And immediately we changed the laws and then we brought something in.
Right.
So more than Nirbhaya, ma'am, I really feel for the fearless Nirbhaya. And there are thousands of small times Nirbhaya that is at stake every day.
Right.
And that is not coming in the media. So the reforms, only if we bring in, we're able to take care of all those people. That girl walking in the road, she's always walking with fear in some parts of the world, some parts of India specifically.
Right.
So what we see day in and day out with Cup Panchayats and other things, I think its time is right, ma'am. So India cannot afford to wait. It's time that the politicians understand having a better police force is for their benefit.
Right.
And having a better police force inside is for the benefit of officers. And the policemen also have to understand that we can demand more from the government only when the services are up to a mark.
Right.
We can demand more salary when we prove to the government that our services are up to the mark. So we can't postpone any further. It's a very beautiful Model Police Act drafted by Soli Saurabh and the Prakash Singh Ji judgment, also very beautiful Model Police Act, ma'am. Right. I hope and pray that government gets the wisdom to put it in action at the fullest.
Absolutely. So a couple of last questions. In your book, you've also mentioned about these MPs with criminal records. So are these people really worthy of sitting in the parliament? And I'm talking about the ones who have cases of murder and even rape registered against them.
Now what has happened, ma'am, the election commission every time is bringing in some kind of an incremental reform. Now we talk about 3 years and more imprisonment. You're banned from standing an election. That's a new improvement in the last 5 years. And the problem is, ma'am, in a criminal system, you always look at conviction. So conviction is the gold standard.
Right.
But somehow due to the faulty criminal justice system, we are not able to get conviction. You get conviction, somehow in the higher courts, you find a way to come out. So I don't want to pronounce anybody as guilty till he has exhausted all the judicial channels that is available to him.
Right.
But for a start, ma'am, but having said that, ma'am, it's the people who vote him. So the person whom I mentioned, so continuously as an independent, as a ruling party member, he continuously keeps building because he is able to solve problems which the government is not able to solve.
Right.
Which I call Bahubalis. He is able to solve. So the government servants also have to pull up socks. Once they start serving the society's problem, solving society's problem, then the so-called Bahubalis might not be able to rise. So if you look at some states where the per capita GDP is more, in Maharashtra, probably in Tamil Nadu, probably we don't see much Bahubali politicians. We see more Bahubali politicians in Bihar and UP and other parts of India, where they believe they are the government and people are dependent on them. So Election Commission, together with taking care of the last mile problem, the government services, we can eradicate Bahubalis, ma'am. So the mighty Indira Gandhi herself was brought down by one Raj Narayan. So India surprises do happen, ma'am, but it should not be a one-off instant. It has to, when somebody violates any power, and the citizen should have the power to punish them. For that to happen, the government should not be faulty. The Tahsildar should be effective. The sub-inspector should be effective.
Right. So, in your view, what are these political reforms that are much needed in the current scenario?
One, criminalization of politics has to end. And whatever the election commission can say, that 3 years conviction, the political parties, somebody should take a risk. Some political party should take a risk and say, this guy is charge sheeted. For me, conviction is not important. It's charge sheet. I'm not going to give a seat to him. Probably that could be a best way for women voters to get attracted also. And going one step further, the political party should say, okay, fine, but at least in the top tier, the top leadership roles, nobody with the criminal antecedent can be there.
Right.
And more importantly, the people also start supporting good candidates. It's a two-way street, ma'am. People cannot vote out good candidates out thinking is useless, is only good for talking, and he will not do anything for me. So people also have to become more awareness. For that, media like print has to play a very important role in taking the goodness of a candidate to a larger public. So together, all those things have to happen, man, because the politician by nature is very wary.
Right.
And if the people expect it, he'll be more than willing to do it. So combinedly, more than election commission, Supreme Court mandating, I think our politicians should also go one step further, even before a law coming in, they can be role model citizens by doing it.
Right. So you have switched your career from a policeman to a politician. What change has it brought to your life? How your day is different, and I mean, how your role is different. How do you feel? Do you feel more empowered? Do you think you can do a lot more? How has it changed for you?
Everything has changed, ma'am. Everything has changed, and more busy, more hectic. And I belong to a party in Tamil Nadu, a national party that is growing. So a lot of travel. At the same time, I'm being more open, more vociferous. The uniform is not preventing me from speaking out what I wanted to speak.
Right.
At the same time, I'm able to create a lot of leaders at the local level, like-minded guys, guys with a vision who want the system to change. So for me, I'm a budding politician. I'm 3.5 months into politics now, and I've come with a vision of bringing that change from the grassroots. I always believe it has to start from panchayat level. So we have to have good MPs and MLAs are maybe figureheads at some point of time, but the panchayat level is where the real delivery happens. You've got to create good number of people there, free of corruption. So it's a work in progress, ma'am. So it's very hectic, very busy. But as I said, ma'am, I've taken the decision with full heart and only with goodness. So it's a great career I had, fantastic career. I'm indebted to the love of Karnataka people and love of my other batchmates and other people also.
Right.
But I felt at this age and time, especially at my time, at the age of 35, I had to make that switch so that I can give the rest of my life, God willing, to a larger cause, ma'am.
Right. Thank you so much for your time, sir. It's been a very great, it's been a very meaningful discussion. In fact, there's so much to talk about, but we are running out of time. Again, I would just like to show this book, Stepping Beyond Khakhi, Revelations of a Real-Life Singham by Bloomsbury, India. It's an excellent book. I've read it. You can get your copy online or on stores. This was a great discussion. Thank you so much for joining us, sir, and many, many congratulations.
Thank you, ma'am. Hope you enjoyed reading the book, ma'am.
Absolutely, sir. It was very interesting. It gives you, it's a very honest book, I would say. That's what I could, that's what was going on to my head when I was reading. It's a very, very honest book, and which is what is the beauty about this. So if anyone wants like a really honest, straightforward peek into the life of a policeman, how the system works, this is the book that one should be reading. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks a lot.